Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Soul's Pride, watching the stars through the main screen. They had been traveling for 3 months, mapping new systems in the outer edges of known space. His crew was small but skilled, and they worked well together. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings," said Communications Officer Choi Ha-na from her station. She was young but had proven herself many times during their journey. "There's something big out there." Lee walked over to look at her screen. The readings showed massive objects moving toward them. "How big?" "Really big, sir. Like nothing we've seen before." Dr. Park Soman looked up from her science station. "Captain, these ships are huge. The largest one is almost 10 times the size of our vessel." Engineer Kim Tae-wook checked his instruments. "Their energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever they're using for power, it's incredibly advanced." Lee felt his stomach tighten. First contact with unknown aliens was always dangerous. "Red alert. All stations ready." Hana, try to open a channel. Before she could respond, the main screen flickered and changed. A massive face appeared looking down at them. The being was tall and made of what looked like living crystal. Its eyes glowed with blue light, and when it spoke, its voice echoed like thunder. "Mortals," the creature said, its voice filling the bridge. "You have entered the sacred space of the divine hegemony. I am High Dominator Velthak, voice of the eternal gods. You will submit to our divine will." Lee exchanged glances with his crew. The alien certainly looked impressive, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. "This is Captain Lee Daeho of the Terran exploration vessel Soul's Pride. We come in peace and seek diplomatic contact." Velthak's crystal face showed confusion. "Diplomatic contact? You speak as if we are equals. We are gods, mortal. You will bow before our divine presence." "With respect," Lee said carefully. "We don't bow to anyone. We're explorers from Earth, and we'd like to learn about your species and culture." The alien's eyes flared brighter. "Species? Culture? You dare to speak of gods as if we were mere creatures like yourself." Dr. Park stepped forward. "Captain, may I?" Lee nodded. "We're scientists and explorers. We study different forms of life throughout the galaxy. Your technology is very advanced, and we'd love to understand how it works." Velthak stared at them for a long moment. "You study us? No species has ever dared to study the gods. All bow immediately upon seeing our divine glory." "Well, we don't," Engineer Kim said bluntly. "You're clearly very advanced, but calling yourselves gods seems a bit much." The silence that followed was deafening. Velthak's expression shifted through several emotions that looked like shock, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Impossible," he whispered. "No mortal species has ever failed to recognize our divinity. In 1,000 years, all have submitted immediately. Maybe you just haven't met the right species yet," Choi Ha-na said with a slight smile. Suddenly, the Soul's Pride shook violently. Warning lights flashed across all stations. "They've grabbed us with some kind of tractor beam," Kim reported. "I can't break free. You will come aboard our flagship," Velthak announced. "There you will witness the true power of the gods and learn to worship as all mortals must." Lee felt angry but kept his voice calm. "And if we refuse?" "Mortals do not refuse gods," Velthak said simply. The next few hours were tense as the Soul's Pride was pulled toward the massive alien ship. Lee gathered his senior staff in the ready room to plan their approach. "What do you think?" he asked Dr. Park. "They're definitely advanced," she said, studying her readings. "But gods? I don't think so. Their technology is impressive, but it follows physical laws. True gods wouldn't need machines. Their whole act seems designed to intimidate," Kim added. "The booming voice, the dramatic appearance, the claims of divinity. It feels like they're trying too hard." "Maybe that's because they have to," Choi Ha-na suggested. "If you're really a god, you don't need to tell people. They just know," Lee nodded. "My thoughts exactly. But we need to be careful. Whatever they are, they have superior technology and firepower." As they approached the alien flagship, its size became even more overwhelming. The ship was like a floating city, covered in spires and glowing symbols. Other vessels surrounded it, all massive and intimidating. "By the way," Dr. Park said, checking her scanner, "I'm detecting several other species aboard their ship. Looks like we're not their first guests. They were taken aboard by a beam of light that somehow moved them from their ship to the alien vessel. The inside was as impressive as the outside, with high ceilings and walls that seemed to glow with their own light." Velthak met them in a huge chamber surrounded by other crystal beings. All of them were tall and imposing, with glowing eyes and voices that echoed strangely. "Behold," Veltak announced, "the divine council of the Corvex Empire. We have ruled 3 star systems for a millennium. Countless species worship us and serve our divine will." "Impressive," Lee said, looking around calmly. "How many species are we talking about?" "Hundreds," another Corvex replied. "All recognize our divine nature immediately." "But we don't," Dr. Park observed. "What does that tell you?" The aliens looked at each other in confusion. "It tells us you are confused and must be educated," Veltak said. But he sounded less certain than before. "Or maybe," Kim suggested, "it tells you that your previous subjects were just scared of your advanced technology." "Blasphemy," roared one of the other Corvex. "We are gods. Our power is divine." "Your power is impressive," Lee agreed. "But power doesn't make you gods. It just makes you powerful." The chamber fell silent again. The Corvex seemed genuinely confused by the humans' reaction. After 1,000 years of immediate worship, they had no idea how to handle people who simply refused to be intimidated. "You will learn," Veltak said finally. "We will show you wonders that will prove our divine nature. You will see demonstrations of power that no mortal technology could achieve." "We look forward to it," Lee said politely. As the humans were led to quarters that felt more like prison cells, they couldn't help but notice the other species aboard the ship. All of them moved with heads bowed and eyes downcast, clearly terrified of their captors. "Those poor people," Choi Hana whispered as they walked past a group of small, furry aliens. 1,000 years of fear," Dr. Park said quietly. "No wonder they believe these Corvex are gods." "Well, we don't," Lee said firmly. "And maybe it's time someone showed these gods what it feels like to be questioned." In their cell that night, the 4 humans planned their next moves. They had no idea that their simple refusal to worship would shake the foundation of an empire built on fear and false divinity. The Corvex had ruled through intimidation for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to face someone who wasn't afraid of them. The test of their supposed divinity was about to begin. The next morning, the humans were brought to a massive chamber filled with floating platforms and swirling energy. Veltak and his council waited for them, looking confident and imposing. "Today you will witness the divine power of the Corvex," Veltak announced. "Prepare to see miracles that will open your mortal minds to the truth of our godhood." Captain Lee Dae-ho and his crew stood calmly, watching with interest rather than fear. This clearly bothered the aliens, who were used to cowering and gasping from their audiences. "First," Veltak said, raising his crystalline hand, "witness our power over matter itself." The air in front of them shimmered, and suddenly a complex sculpture appeared made of what looked like pure gold. The metal twisted and changed shape, forming intricate patterns that would have taken human artists months to create. "Amazing," Dr. Park So-min said, pulling out her scanner. "The molecular restructuring is incredibly precise. How do you control the atomic bonds so accurately?" Veltak blinked, clearly not expecting a scientific question. "It is divine will. Gods do not explain their miracles to mortals. But the energy signatures suggest you're using some kind of field manipulation," Dr. Park continued, studying her readings. "Is it electromagnetic? Quantum-based? The power requirements must be enormous." The other Corvex looked confused. "She asks how we perform miracles," one whispered to another. "What manner of mortal questions the divine?" Engineer Kim Tae-wook stepped closer to examine the sculpture. "The precision is incredible, but it's still following physical laws. Matter can't be created or destroyed, so you're either converting energy to mass or restructuring existing materials. Which is it?" "Silence!" Veltak boomed, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You will observe and worship, not question." "We're explorers," Captain Lee said calmly. "Questioning is what we do. It's how we learn." "You should not seek to learn the ways of gods," another Corvex protested. "Why not?" Communications Officer Choi Hana asked innocently. "If you're really gods, wouldn't you want us to understand and appreciate your divine methods?" The aliens exchanged worried glances. In 1,000 years, no one had ever asked them to explain their miracles. All previous species had simply fallen to their knees in terror and worship. "Very well," Veltak said, trying to regain control. "Witness our dominion over space itself." The chamber around them suddenly expanded, becoming impossibly large. Stars appeared overhead, showing the vast cosmos. The humans found themselves standing on what seemed to be a planet's surface, with alien landscapes stretching to the horizon. Impressive holographic projection, Kim observed, kneeling to touch the ground. The tactile feedback is nearly perfect. The processing power for this level of simulation must be incredible. It is not simulation, Velthak roared. We have transported you across the galaxy. No, you haven't, Dr. Park said, checking her instruments. We're still on your ship. This is advanced virtual reality, but it's still technology, not magic. The projection flickered slightly, and for a moment they could see the metal walls of the chamber again. The Korvax looked shocked that their illusion had been penetrated so easily. How did you know? One of them asked before Velthak could stop him. Simple physics, Choi Hana explained. If you really transported us across the galaxy, our ship's sensors would have detected the movement. Also, the gravitational field is still the same as your ship. The holographic environment vanished, leaving them back in the original chamber. The Korvax Council was now visibly upset, muttering among themselves in their crystalline language. Perhaps, Velthak said, his voice less confident. You require a demonstration of our power over life and death. He gestured, and screens appeared showing various alien species throughout the ship. All of them were bowing and praying to images of the Korvax. Behold our faithful worshippers, Velthak said. With a thought we could end their lives or grant them eternal existence. That's not divine power, Captain Lee said firmly. That's just bullying. Anyone with superior technology could threaten weaker species. But they worship us willingly, another Korvax protested. Do they? Dr. Park asked. Or are they just scared? There's a big difference between worship and fear. Show us one who worships you because they want to, not because they're afraid. Choi Hana challenged. The Korvax fell silent. After a long moment, Velthak spoke quietly. All mortals fear gods. It is natural. We don't fear you, Kim pointed out. Maybe that should tell you something. You should fear us. Velthak suddenly exploded, his calm facade cracking. We have power beyond your imagination. We could destroy your entire species with a thought. Could you? Captain Lee asked calmly. Or could you just use your advanced weapons to attack us? Because there's a difference. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of alien machinery. The Korvax looked at each other uncertainly. For the first time in centuries, their claims of divinity were being questioned by someone who wasn't trembling in fear. You will learn, Velthak said finally, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We have received word that more of your kind approach our territory. A small fleet of your warrior vessels dares to challenge the divine realm. They're probably just coming to look for us, Captain Lee said. They will serve as the perfect demonstration, Velthak continued, his confidence returning. We will destroy them before your eyes. Then you will see the fate that awaits all who defy the gods. If you destroy an unarmed rescue mission, you're not gods, Dr. Park said quietly. You're just murderers with fancy weapons. How dare you? One of the council members shrieked. She's right, Choi Hana added. Gods wouldn't need to kill people to prove they're gods. The fact that you think violence will convince us just proves you're not what you claim to be. Velthak stared at them for a long moment. You are the strangest mortals we have ever encountered. In 1,000 years, no species has ever failed to recognize our divine nature. Maybe, Captain Lee suggested, that's because we're the first species you've met that isn't easily intimidated by a light show and some loud voices. Our power is real. Velthak insisted. Your technology is real, Kim agreed. But technology isn't divinity. It's just science you understand and we don't. Yet. That single word, yet, seemed to shake the Korvax more than anything else. The idea that their power could be understood and potentially matched had never occurred to them. Take them back to their cells, Velthak ordered. When we destroy their rescue fleet, they will understand the price of defying gods. As they were led away, Dr. Park managed to get closer to one of the Korvax devices. Her scanner picked up detailed readings of its energy signatures and operational frequencies, information that might prove very useful later. Captain, she whispered as they walked, I'm getting some interesting data on their technology. It's advanced, but it has patterns. Patterns we might be able to understand. Good work, Lee whispered back. Keep analyzing everything you can. In their cells that night, the humans shared what they had observed. The Korvax technology was impressive but not supernatural. Their claims of divinity seemed to be based more on intimidation than actual divine power. They're scared, Choi Hana observed. Did you see how they reacted when we questioned them? Real gods wouldn't be defensive about their power. They've probably been doing this so long. They've started to believe their own lies, Kim suggested. The question is, Captain Lee said quietly, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Outside their cell, the Corvex fleet prepared for war against the approaching human ships. But for the first time in a millennium, doubt had crept into their crystalline minds. The humans had planted a dangerous seed, the idea that gods should not need to prove their divinity through violence, and that seed was beginning to grow. Dr. Park So-min worked quietly in her cell, analyzing the scanner data she had collected during their divine demonstration. The readings were fascinating and troubling at the same time. The more she studied them, the more convinced she became that the Corvex were not what they claimed to be. Captain, she whispered to Lee Dae-ho, who was resting on the hard bench that served as a bed. I think I've figured something out. Lee sat up immediately. What is it? Their technology, Dr. Park said, showing him her scanner's display. It's incredibly advanced, but it's not their own creation. Engineer Kim Tae-wook moved closer to look at the readings. What do you mean? Look at these energy patterns, Dr. Park explained, pointing to the scanner screen. They're using some kind of artificial intelligence network to control their technology. But the way they interface with it suggests they don't really understand how it works. Communications Officer Choi Hana joined them. So they're using someone else's technology? More than that, Dr. Park said excitedly. I think they found an ancient computer system and learned to use it, but they don't know how it actually functions. They just learned the commands to make it work. Like finding a car and learning to drive it without understanding how the engine works, Kim said thoughtfully. Exactly. And there's something else, Dr. Park continued. The AI network they're using has some kind of built-in limitations. I detected several harmonic frequencies that seem to disrupt its operations. Weaknesses? Captain Lee asked. Possibly. If we could generate the right frequency pattern, we might be able to interfere with their power source. Their quiet discussion was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Velthak appeared outside their cell, accompanied by several guards. Your rescue fleet has arrived, he announced with satisfaction. Soon you will witness the divine wrath of the gods as we destroy those who dare to challenge us. They're just coming to look for us, Captain Lee said calmly. They don't want to fight. It matters not what they want, Velthak replied. They have entered sacred space. The penalty is death. The humans were brought to the flagship's main viewing chamber, where massive screens showed the approaching human ships. Captain Lee recognized the configuration immediately. It was a standard rescue formation, not a war fleet. That's the heavy cruiser Incheon, he told his crew quietly. Captain Yoon Sung-ho is commanding. Good man. On the screens, they could see the human ships had stopped at a respectful distance and were broadcasting standard first contact protocols. Captain Yoon's voice came through the alien communication system. This is Captain Yoon Sung-ho of the Terran Defense Force vessel Incheon. We are searching for our missing exploration ship, Soul's Pride. Please respond if you have information about their whereabouts. Velthak stepped forward to the communication panel. Mortals, you have entered the realm of the divine hegemony. Your companions refuse to worship the gods and must be punished. Withdraw immediately or face divine wrath. There was a pause before Captain Yoon responded. We don't understand. Are you holding our people prisoner? We request immediate diplomatic contact to resolve the situation peacefully. There will be no diplomacy, Velthak declared. Mortals do not negotiate with gods. Submit or be destroyed. Dr. Park watched the tactical displays showing the positions of both fleets. The Corvex had overwhelming superiority in size and apparent firepower, but something bothered her about the formation. Captain, she whispered to Lee, look at their fleet positioning. Most of those ships aren't maintaining proper spacing for a battle formation. Kim studied the display. You're right, and some of them have identical energy signatures. That's unusual for individual ships. Before they could discuss it further, Velthak ordered the attack. Demonstrate our divine power. Destroy one of their vessels. The main Corvex ship fired a brilliant beam of energy that struck one of the human escort frigates. The smaller ship exploded in a burst of flame and debris. No, Captain Lee shouted, but it was too late. On the communication channel, they could hear the shock and anger in Captain Yoon's voice. You just murdered 37 people. This is an act of war. This is divine judgment, Velthak replied coldly. Surrender now or watch as we destroy you one ship at a time. But something unexpected happened. Instead of surrendering or fleeing in terror as countless species had done before, the human ships began to move into combat formation. All ships, battle stations. Captain Yoon's voice was calm and professional. We have hostile aliens who just committed an act of war against the Terran Defense Force. Prepare for engagement. The Corvex looked surprised. They dare to fight gods? One of them asked in disbelief. Impossible, another whispered. All mortals flee when they witness our divine power. Dr. Park realized this was their chance. While the aliens were distracted by the unexpected human response, she activated her scanner and began a deep analysis of the flagship's power systems. Kim, she whispered urgently, I need you to help me map their energy network. If I'm right about the harmonic weaknesses, we might be able to signal the human fleet. Engineer Kim understood immediately and began his own scans. I see what you mean. Their whole power grid is connected to that AI network. If we could find the right frequency? Found it, Dr. Park said excitedly. There's a specific harmonic that disrupts the AI's control algorithms. But we need to transmit it somehow. Choi Hana had been quietly listening to the communication channels. I might be able to help with that. Their communication system ties into the same network. If I can access it, do it, Captain Lee ordered quietly. While the Corvex watched their fleet prepare to destroy the human ships, Choi Hana worked at the communication panel. Her training as a linguist had taught her to quickly understand communication systems and the Corvex technology, while advanced, followed logical patterns. I'm in, she whispered. I can send a signal to our ships. Send them the harmonic frequency data, Dr. Park instructed. Tell them to modulate their weapons to match these patterns. As Choi Hana transmitted the crucial information, the space battle began in earnest. The Corvex ships opened fire with devastating energy weapons, but the human ships were fast and agile, dodging many of the attacks. Destroy them, Velthak commanded. Show these mortals the price of defying gods. But then something happened that shocked the Corvex to their cores. The human ships began firing back, and their weapons were modulated to the exact frequency that Dr. Park had discovered. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Corvex shields flickered and failed. Their massive ships, which had seemed invincible moments before, suddenly showed damage as human weapons found their targets. Impossible, Velthak screamed. Our divine protection cannot fail. Your technology can fail, Captain Lee said firmly. Because that's all it is, technology. On the screens, they watched as the holographic projections of many Corvex ships suddenly disappeared, revealing that the enemy fleet was much smaller than it had appeared. The AI network that had created the illusions was being disrupted by the human weapons. How? Velthak demanded, turning to stare at the humans. How do you know our weaknesses? Because we studied you, Dr. Park replied. We observed, we analyzed, and we learned. That's what scientists do. The flagship shuddered as human weapons struck its hull. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Corvex flagship was taking damage in battle. This cannot be happening, another Corvex council member moaned. We are gods! Gods cannot be defeated by mortals. You're not gods, Kim said bluntly. You're just aliens who found some ancient technology and learned to use it. But you never bothered to understand it, so you never saw its weaknesses. The bridge erupted in chaos as more human weapons strikes hit home. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail. The other species aboard the vessel, who had lived in terror of the Corvex for generations, looked up in amazement as their gods ran around in panic. Alert all ships, Velthak ordered desperately. Full retreat. We must withdraw and regroup. But it was too late. The human fleet had found their weakness, and word was already spreading through the communication networks to every subjugated species in the Empire. The gods were not invincible. They could be hurt, they could be defeated, and they were running away. As the Corvex flagship began its retreat, Captain Lee looked at his crew with pride. Well done, everyone. I think we just changed the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. The question is, Dr. Park said, watching the chaos around them, what happens to a 1,000-year-old empire when everyone realizes their gods are fake? They were about to find out. The Corvex flagship shook violently as another human weapons blast struck its hull. Captain Lee Daeho and his crew watched in amazement as their captors ran around the bridge in complete panic. For 1,000 years, the Corvex had never experienced fear in battle. Damage reports coming in from all sectors, one of the Corvex officers reported to Velthak, his crystalline voice cracking with terror. The mortals' weapons are somehow penetrating our divine shields. Impossible, Velthak roared, but his voice no longer carried the confident boom of before. Reinforce the shields. Call upon the full power of the divine network. Engineer Kim Taewook nudged Dr. Park Somin. Look at their control panels. Half the systems are failing. Dr. Park studied her scanner readings. The harmonic disruption is spreading through their entire network. The AI system they've been using is shutting down to protect itself. On the main screen, they could see the space battle unfolding. The human fleet, led by Captain Yoon Sung-ho's heavy cruiser Incheon, was systematically targeting the real Corvex ships while ignoring the holographic projections that were flickering and disappearing. Captain Yoon is a smart man, Captain Lee observed. He's not wasting ammunition on the fake ships. Communications Officer Choi Hana was still monitoring the alien communication channels. Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from all over the Corvex Empire. Word is spreading fast that their ships are being damaged. What are the other species saying? Dr. Park asked. They're confused and scared, Choi Hana replied. For generations, they've been told the Corvex are invincible gods. Now they're watching them bleed. Velthak stormed over to the human prisoners, his glowing eyes wild with rage and fear. What have you done? How do your warriors know our sacred weaknesses? We told them, Captain Lee said simply. Because we figured out you're not gods. You're just bullies with stolen technology. Blasphemy. Velthak struck the force field containing the humans, but it flickered and failed under his touch. Even the prison systems were being affected by the network disruption. The 4 humans stepped out of their cell, now free but still surrounded by desperate aliens. Kim picked up a fallen energy weapon from a guard who had run away in panic. I don't think we'll need that, Dr. Park said, watching the chaos around them. They're too scared to fight us now. She was right. The Corvex crew was running around trying to save their failing ship, paying no attention to the escaped prisoners. Their entire worldview was crumbling as their supposedly divine technology failed them. All ships emergency retreat, Velthak commanded over the communication system. Fall back to the sacred homeworld. But the retreat was not going well. On the tactical display, they could see several Corvex ships limping away with heavy damage. 2 had already been destroyed when their power systems completely failed. Captain, Choi Hana said, monitoring the alien communications. The other species in the Empire are starting to rebel. I'm hearing reports of uprisings on at least 12 worlds. That's what happens when people realize their gods aren't real, Captain Lee said grimly. The flagship shuddered again as the human fleet continued its attack. This time the lights went out for several seconds before emergency power came online. Divine power core is failing, a Corvex engineer reported in terror. The sacred energy is leaving us. It's not sacred, Kim called out from across the bridge. It's just an artificial intelligence network and you broke it by using it wrong for 1,000 years. Velthak turned on him with fury. Silence, mortal. You know nothing of divine mysteries. I know engineering, Kim replied calmly. And your power system is about to have a complete meltdown. You might want to evacuate this ship. As if to prove his point, explosions began echoing through the hull. The ancient AI network that the Corvex had been using was shutting down its connections to protect itself, leaving their ships powerless. This is Captain Yoon Sung-ho of the Terran Defense Force, came a voice over the communication system. Corvex vessel, your ship is critically damaged. We offer you the chance to surrender and evacuate your crew. The bridge fell silent. In 1,000 years, no enemy had ever offered mercy to the Corvex. They had always been the ones offering terms to defeated foes. They offer us mercy? One of the council members whispered in disbelief. It's what civilized species do, Dr. Park explained. Even when fighting, we try to preserve life when possible. Velthak stared at the communication panel, his crystalline features showing emotions he had never experienced before. Fear, confusion, and something that might have been shame. I don't understand, he said quietly. We are gods. How can mortals defeat gods? Because you're not gods, Captain Lee said gently. You never were. You found some advanced technology and used it to scare other species into worshipping you. But fear isn't worship, and technology isn't divinity. But we have ruled for 1,000 years, another Corvex protested weakly. You've been bullies for 1,000 years, Choi Hana corrected. There's a difference. More explosions rocked the ship. The hull was beginning to fail as the power systems collapsed completely. On the main screen, they could see escape pods launching from other Corvex ships as their crews abandoned the failing vessels. "Velthak," Captain Lee said urgently, "you need to evacuate this ship now. Your power core is going critical." The High Dominator looked at him with confusion. "Why do you warn us? We destroyed your ship. We killed your people." "Because it's the right thing to do," Captain Lee replied. "We don't want unnecessary deaths even among our enemies." For a long moment, Velthak stared at the human captain. Then he turned to his crew. "All hands abandon ship. Evacuate to the escape pods." As the Corvex crew rushed to escape their dying flagship, the humans made their way to the hangar bay where their ship, Soul's Pride, was being held. Kim quickly checked the systems while the others prepared for departure. "She's undamaged," Kim reported with relief. The Corvex were too confident in their prison systems to bother disabling our ship. As they launched from the collapsing alien flagship, Captain Lee opened a channel to the human fleet. "Incheon, this is Captain Lee Daeho of Soul's Pride. We're free and clear." "Good to see you alive, Lee," Captain Yoon responded. "What's the situation with these aliens?" "They're not gods despite what they claim," Captain Lee replied. "They're just an empire built on fear and intimidation. But that empire is collapsing now that people have seen they can be defeated." "Understood. We're detecting massive communication traffic throughout their territory. Sounds like rebellions are breaking out everywhere." Dr. Park was monitoring the alien channels. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from hundreds of species. They're all talking about the fall of the false gods. This is spreading faster than we could have imagined." Through the viewport, they watched as the massive Corvex flagship finally exploded, its ancient power core unable to handle the cascade failure. The other Corvex ships were retreating as fast as their damaged systems would allow. "Look at that," Choi Hana said, pointing to the tactical display. "Their whole fleet is running away." "For the first time in a millennium," Captain Lee observed, "the Corvex are learning what it feels like to lose." As they rejoined the human fleet, Captain Lee couldn't help but think about the implications of what had just happened. An empire that had ruled through fear for 1,000 years was crumbling, all because someone had finally asked the simple question, what if they're not really gods? "Captain," Dr. Park said thoughtfully, "what do you think will happen to all those species that were enslaved by the Corvex?" "They'll be free," Captain Lee replied with satisfaction. "For the first time in centuries, they'll be free to make their own choices." "And the Corvex?" Captain Lee considered this. "Maybe they'll learn what it means to be mortal. And maybe that will make them better people than they ever were as fake gods." The space battle was over, but the real revolution was just beginning across 3 star systems as countless species realized they no longer had to bow to false deities. The age of the divine hegemony was ending, and it was ending because 4 humans had refused to be impressed by a light show. 6 hours after the space battle, the Corvex Empire was in complete chaos. Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching the communication channels fill with reports from across 3 star systems. The revolution was happening faster than anyone could have predicted. "Captain," Communications Officer Choi Hana reported, "I'm getting uprising reports from 47 worlds so far. The enslaved species are overthrowing Corvex garrisons everywhere." Dr. Park So-min looked up from her science station. "The psychological impact has been incredible. For 1,000 years, these people believed the Corvex were invincible gods. Seeing them defeated in battle shattered that belief completely. It's like pulling down a statue," Engineer Kim Tae-wook observed. "Once people see it can fall, they realize it was never as strong as they thought." Captain Yoon Sung-ho's voice came over the communication system from the heavy cruiser Incheon. "Lee, we're receiving surrender requests from Corvex facilities across the sector. Most of their remaining forces are giving up without a fight. What about Velthak and the surviving council members?" Captain Lee asked. "They've retreated to their homeworld. Long-range sensors show they're fortifying their position there, but honestly, I don't think they have much fight left in them." Captain Lee made a decision. "Captain Yoon, I'd like permission to take my ship to the Corvex homeworld. I think it's time for a final conversation with our former captors." "Are you sure that's wise? They might still be dangerous." "I don't think they are," Captain Lee replied. "Their power was built on fear and illusion. Now that both are gone, I suspect they're more frightened than we are." 2 days later, the Soul's Pride approached the Corvex homeworld. The planet was beautiful. covered in crystal formations that caught and reflected the light of its twin suns. But the orbital defenses that should have challenged them remained silent. No response to our hails, Choi Hana reported. But I'm detecting massive communication traffic on the planet's surface. It sounds like arguing. Can you translate any of it? Captain Lee asked. Some of it. The Korvax appear to be having a civil war of sorts. Different factions are blaming each other for the collapse of their empire. Dr. Park studied her scanner readings. Captain, I'm detecting the source of their ancient AI network. It's on the planet's surface in what appears to be ruins of a much older civilization. The original builders of the technology, Kim realized. The Korvax must have found their ruins and learned to use their machines, but never understood them, Dr. Park added. That's why they thought it was magic instead of science. Finally, a response came from the planet. Velthak's voice, but it lacked all the booming authority it had once carried. Human vessel, why have you come here? Have you not humiliated us enough? We've come to talk, Captain Lee replied simply. May we land? There was a long pause. You wish to talk? Not to conquer? We're explorers, not conquerors. We've always wanted to talk. Another pause, then coordinates for a landing site were transmitted. The Soul's Pride descended through the crystal atmosphere and landed near a massive structure that looked part ancient ruins and part Korvax construction. Velthak met them at the landing site, but he was alone and looked much smaller than he had on his flagship. Without the dramatic lighting and booming sound effects, he was just a tall, crystalline being who looked very tired. Why? He asked simply as they approached. Why have you come here? To understand, Dr. Park replied. And maybe to help. Help? Velthak laughed bitterly. You have destroyed everything we built. Our empire is gone. Our subjects have rebelled. Our power is broken. What help could you possibly offer? The help of equals, Captain Lee said. Not the worship of subjects, but the cooperation of friends. They walked into the ancient structure, where the source of the Korvax power was revealed. It was a massive crystalline computer, clearly built by a civilization far more advanced than either humans or Korvax. We found this 1,000 years ago, Velthak explained. Our ancestors were a small, weak species barely able to travel between worlds. But when we learned to interface with this machine, we became gods. No, Dr. Park said gently, studying the ancient device. You became powerful. There's a difference. Kim examined the interface connections. You've been using this wrong for centuries. Look at these connections. They're crude jury-rigged interfaces. The original builders intended something completely different. What do you mean? Velthak asked. Dr. Park ran her hands over the ancient crystal surface, her scanner picking up incredibly complex data patterns. This isn't a weapon or a tool for domination. It's a teaching machine. A what? The original builders left this as a test for younger species, Dr. Park explained, her excitement growing as she understood more. It was meant to grant power temporarily, then see what the users would do with it. Would they use it to help others and explore the universe, or would they use it to dominate and control? Velthak stared at the machine in horror. You mean, we failed the test? For 1,000 years, Choi Hana said sadly. The machine gave you power, and you used it to enslave others instead of lifting them up. But you, Velthak said, looking at the humans, you saw our power and questioned it instead of fearing it. You studied it instead of worshipping it. You passed the test we failed. Captain Lee nodded slowly. That's why your network shut down when we transmitted the harmonic frequencies. The AI recognized that we understood what it really was, a tool for learning, not a weapon for conquest. As if responding to their conversation, the ancient machine began to glow more brightly. Dr. Park's scanner readings went wild as the AI system activated systems that had been dormant for centuries. It's responding to us, she said in amazement. The teaching protocols are coming online. What does that mean? Velthak asked nervously. It means, Kim said with growing excitement, that the real test is just beginning. This machine wasn't meant to grant power. It was meant to share knowledge. Scientific knowledge, technological advances, insights into the universe itself. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing star charts, scientific formulas, and technological blueprints beyond anything either species had ever imagined. But these weren't weapons or tools of domination. They were instruments of exploration, healing and understanding. All this time, Belthak whispered, we could have been learning instead of conquering. We could have been exploring instead of enslaving. You still can, Captain Lee said. It's not too late to start over. But our empire is gone. Our subjects hate us. We have nothing left. You have your lives, Dr. Park pointed out. And now you have the chance to learn what this machine was really meant to teach. The other species won't forgive us, Belthak said sadly. Maybe not immediately, Captain Lee admitted. But if you prove you've changed, if you use this knowledge to help instead of hurt, they might give you a chance. Choi Hana checked her communication equipment. Captain, I'm getting reports that the rebellions are stabilizing. The former subject species are forming cooperative governments. They're scared but hopeful. Then maybe, Kim suggested, the Korvex could join these new governments as equals instead of rulers. Velthak looked at the ancient machine with new understanding. We spent 1,000 years believing we were gods when we were really just children playing with toys we didn't understand. We're all children when it comes to the universe, Dr. Park said kindly. The difference is whether we keep learning or stop asking questions. As they prepared to leave the Korvex homeworld, Captain Lee made one final offer. The machine will teach you incredible things, but knowledge is meant to be shared. When you're ready, we'd like to learn alongside you. You would work with us. After everything we've done, everyone deserves a chance to grow, Captain Lee replied. Even former gods. 6 months later, Captain Lee stood in the assembly hall of the first Galactic Liberation Council meeting. Representatives from dozens of species that had been freed from Korvex rule were working together to build a new future. At the back of the hall, he noticed a small group of Korvex delegates, led by Velthak. They sat quietly, listening and learning instead of commanding and demanding. The ancient AI had taught them much about science and technology, but the hardest lesson had been learning humility. Captain Lee, Velthak approached him during a break. I wanted to thank you. For what? For showing us what we could have been. For proving that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Captain Lee smiled. Just remember that lesson and teach it to others. As the council meeting resumed, representatives from across the galaxy worked together to build a future based on cooperation instead of domination. The age of false gods was over, and the age of equals had begun. And it had all started because 4 humans had looked at beings claiming to be gods and simply asked, "Prove it." The universe was a much better place when people stopped bowing and started questioning.